To talk about the issue further, we're now joined by Robert Fife. He's the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Catherine Lévesque is parliamentary reporter for the National Post, and Tonda MacCharles, who is now the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Welcome, all of you. Tonda, congratulations.
Thanks, Michael.
Yay. Now you'll never rest.
Right.
Listen, okay.
Thank God for makeup.
I have a career because of it. Anyways, listen, let's talk about China interference. And I'm going to begin with you here, Bob, because you've seen the documents, the leaked documents from CSIS. When you heard the Prime Minister earlier this week essentially say he was not going to do a public inquiry, he's going to turn to these two closed-door investigations and bring in a rapporteur, what was your reaction? Did you think that was an appropriate avenue?
No, I agree with Richard Fadden, who's the former CSIS director and former National Security Advisor to Mr. Trudeau, and Stephen Harper, as well as Jean-Pierre Kingsley, the former Chief Electoral Officer, that a public inquiry is needed, and it shouldn't just focus on the Chinese interference that we know about in the 2019 and 2021 elections. Chinese interference is very deep. It goes municipal, it's provincial, it's federal, and we need to have a public airing of this. Obviously, counterintelligence investigations are going to have to be held behind closed doors, and whoever, if it presumably be a judge, would be able to call in CSIS officials and officers, including people who were involved in those investigations, to ask them how you arrived at this, to get a really good picture of this, and when, if it was sent up to the 6th floor of CSIS, how did you analyze this before it was sent to the National Security Advisor? Like, really find out how this information ended up. How was it processed? Did it get to the Prime Minister, or didn't it get to the Prime Minister? But beyond that, it shouldn't just be on Chinese foreign interference, which the CSIS director says is the greatest threat to the country right now. But we do know that Russia tried to interfere in our elections. So does Iran. In the South Asian communities, I'm sure there's interference as well. It would be very helpful to this country to have a public inquiry. It's going to take some time, so that we have a really good understanding of how big of a problem it is and how we can counter it, because sunshine and transparency is the best way to deal with foreign interference.
Mm-hmm. Tonda, I do wonder about why the government chose this route. Is it because they are dealing, as we hear from Liberals, with sensitive information, or is it, as we're hearing from Conservatives, because Liberals are afraid they're going to be painted in a bad light?
Well, look, I think that Bob's outlined a big challenge in all of this and confronting all of it. It's massive in terms of influence and interference and who are the actors involved. And so I agree that there's some merit to the idea that someone conducting an inquiry could hear a lot of this behind closed doors. I think where the government is running up against a bit of a challenge this week in confronting the problem politically is that I think in one sense there's a risk of going overboard and challenging the legitimacy of the election, which to date none of the parties are doing. But there's also the question of I think it being something that's broader than just do we look at elections meddling, or does an inquiry look at the whole landscape that Bob just outlined? And then what is it? Are we looking at a 3 to 5 year thing? And is there an issue or is there a mechanism whereby they can come up with some answers to how it was dealt with, who heard what, who knew what did they do with that information more quickly to address some of the more pressing and urgent concerns before the next election, which is likely within 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. For sure within 2 years. So, is it because the Liberals are only concerned about protecting sensitive information? No, there's a political calculation here too. Or is it just because, as the Conservatives say, Trudeau's covering up for Beijing? That's, I think, a ridiculous suggestion because they've offered no evidence that there was something beyond a government, what we can tell by a lot of the reporting, scrambling to understand what the problem was. And none of the documents say that. So, so there you go. I think that, for any government, whatever the stripe, to get their arms around this issue, you almost have to scope out an immediate problem and how do you deal with that, and then a broader issue, which is what the Committee of Parliamentarians has been calling for.
Yeah, yeah. You know, what's interesting is I listened to you, Tonda, and I'll bring you into this, Catherine, because there has been the suggestion, not said publicly, but, you know, behind closed doors and, you know, the background interviews, the suggestion that perhaps the Liberals are going this route because it will take some time and that will help people to move on to another topic and save them the controversy of this foreign interference. What have you heard about that?
Well, I think, you know, indeed Liberals thought this was just going to go away, right? Like the Mackenzie affair, you know, like a number of subjects that Conservatives have been trying to score political points about. The difference is that this time, this is a problem that has been going on for decades. A lot of people are aware about this, and, you know, it has been, it's long overdue. I mean, Canada has to do something about this and has to confront this. And, you know, I think there's a reason why we saw these leaks going to media is because the intelligence community wants the government to act and really take this seriously. So, you know, the feeling I get is that the Liberals, you know, we're kind of hoping this would go away. We saw a variety of, you know, ways in which the Prime Minister especially, you know, tried to deflect and, you know, say, well, look, this is a partisan issue. You know, the Conservatives are exaggerating. You know, he also said that, you know, putting in question the result of the elections was maybe associated to racism. So there were, and even saying that, you know, maybe the media reports or the leaks just simply were not true. And to then this week come out and say, well, look, we're going to take a series of measures to take this. And today, well, on Friday, Marco Mendicino coming out and actually saying, well, look, we're going to go ahead with a foreign agent registry. We're going to launch consultations. So really, I feel like they're in damage control mode as right now.
Well, I'm going to talk about Marco Mendicino in a moment. But, you know, we talk about the impact that this is having. And it was interesting, Bob, because Abacus came out with some new numbers today. And what I found interesting was this line. To the question, did Chinese interference change the election outcome? 37% of respondents said they didn't know. They're not saying that the election was stolen. They're not saying that it necessarily, but they obviously have doubts about the results. How troubling is that?
Well, look, Chinese interference in the 2019 and 2021 elections did not affect the outcome. That's not the case, and none of the parties have been saying that. But if it even affected one riding, that's one too many. So this is, I think, what you're seeing with the Liberals deflecting and doing filibusters and the Commons Committee investigating the Chinese interference is that they're really hurrying on this one, because this is a story that's gotten out of the Ottawa bubble. It's gotten down on Main Street. And people understand that something's really fishy here. And the government has to deal with this issue much more seriously than they have been. What they tried on Monday, I don't think is going to be very successful, especially when you have Liberal MPs filibustering at a Commons Committee so they won't allow the Chief of Staff to appear.
What I would say about those numbers you just said is, you know, that just shows people are unsure. They don't know what to make of it. The more worrying number in that data for the government and anyone dealing with it, really, including the Conservative leader, by the way, is that, you know, about 13% or so actually do believe the election outcome was not legitimate, and another 12% are not sure, but maybe it was. So that's 25%. One in, whatever, four, I'm terrible at this, math. 1 in 4 Canadians are actually saying the election result is not credible. In this country, it's almost like it's already such a huge challenge for both parties to both deal with the substance of the allegation and yet still protect Canadians' trust and confidence in the electoral system. That is a very tricky line to walk.
Trust and confidence, and that makes me think about the rapporteur, because that still unnamed person is meant to be beyond reproach, is going to be some eminent Canadian. Still not named, Catherine. Do you think all of this controversy will pressure the government to name someone sooner rather than later?
Well, you know, we've already heard the government say it's not going to take months, it's going to take weeks to name this person. Now, I wouldn't
Which
want
is
to
fast by Ottawa standards, but not
Absolutely.
fast by you know, Main Street standards.
To get anything done, you know, a couple of weeks is actually quite fast. Now, I think the challenge is to find this person, right? Because this person has not yet been named, is already criticized by, you know, notably Pierre Poilievre. You know, he says that this is a fake job, that, you know, he's already saying that it's going to be a Liberal insider. So, I think the challenge here is really to find this person, get this person to accept the job. And so I really wonder, you know, where the Liberal government is going to find this person. Maybe they should ask someone who's affiliated with the Conservative Party. I mean, that could be interesting. But at the same time, I think another issue is the fact that the government will also be choosing this person, whereas the opposition parties would certainly like to get their input in that as well.
Well, listen, let's talk about Marco Mendicino. Don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to just put it out to the group. You know, here he is today announcing consultations to create a foreign agent registry. Consultation. Are you surprised by the lack of urgency?
Well, first of all, they've been talking about that since February 2021.
Yes.
This is ridiculous. If they want to show action, you can create a foreign agent registry right now. You can change the criminal code to make foreign interference a criminal offense. You know, you can change the CSIS Act so CSIS can be far more outcoming about these kind of threats rather than hiding behind secrecy all the time. These are some simple measures that can be done.
I think that the debate over whether to do a foreign registry is one that's still alive, and it shouldn't have just been started. It has been ongoing, like Bob said, and as of last June, they were saying they were starting consultations. So where's the result of that work? The result of that work should have been a decision by now to say, we will go ahead with it, or, as the government has suggested, to do so risks tarring a whole bunch of communities with a stigma, you know, a blacklist. And it's.
But that's ridiculous. That's blacklist
whatever the
stuff.
case may be. It's time for them to have made a decision on it and rolled out the decision and justified their decision. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think that you know, the mechanism, we've seen it in other countries. The U.S. has one. Australia has one. They don't function perfectly, but they are a way to actually register people who are in the employ or payment by foreign actors, and so that provides a level of transparency, like a lobbyist registry.
Absolutely. It's a good first step. And we saw some pro-democracy activists actually in committee this week say, well, look, it's not perfect. We know this, but, you know, there is no consensus in the Chinese community. You know, a lot of people want to see this done. You know, it's just going to help us kind of identify, I mean, who is paid by Beijing as of the moment. But right now, what the Liberal government is doing is they seem to be kicking the can down the road and, you know, just saying, look, there's going to be another delay. In May, maybe we'll do something about it. We're not sure what kind of form it's going to take. So, yeah, I just think, you know, we still don't have any assurance that this registry will actually happen, or if it's going to happen before the next election.
Okay, well, it's been a busy week back. They're back on break, but then we'll reconvene when Parliament returns. Bob, Catherine, Tonda, thank you.
Thanks,
and once
Michael.
again, Tonda, congratulations.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.